Hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of the Don Maki podcast. I'm here today with Representative Brian Ashe from the Second Hamden District. Brian, thanks for coming.
Oh, Don, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, we've been trying to put this together for quite a while,
I know.
and it's been busy. But I just thought it would be great for people to get a little bit of update on what's happening statewide and in your district, and things that affect East Longmeadow in particular. So.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. And one thing, when we first started communicating about trying to sit down, the so-called streaming bills were a little bit up in the air, referring to how local, from my standpoint, because we cover the local municipal meetings, what that meant for in-person versus remote. The question was on everybody's minds, well, when are we going back to in-person meetings?
Right.
And what did that mean then for the
future.
availability of remote meetings?
Yeah.
But how's that been for you at the state level as a state legislator?
I mean, and probably the same here. I mean, there's some benefits, but there's some major disadvantages too. I mean, meeting in person, obviously, so much better if you can, but not every meeting needs to be done in person, especially like I said, some of the town meetings, if you can get more people involved, especially when you're out in some of the rural areas, if you can get more people involved that would have been if they had to physically be there, I think it's a good thing as long as you're getting work done. The only thing that scares me, you just don't want towns or people to take advantage of it where there's no more in-person meetings, because I think you have to have the in-person meetings. You have to see people, you have to physically talk to them and be there, but there's also so much wasted time and energy traveling or getting to meetings, especially when they're out of the way, or maybe it's a 15-minute meeting and you don't want to drive an hour for a 15-minute meeting, you be there and then you leave. So I think, as horrible as the pandemic was, silver lining of some of those things, I think we've learned different and sometimes better ways to do business. I think a lot of smaller businesses, larger businesses have used different ways to say, you know what, this is more effective, probably works better for everybody. So hopefully we get to a hybrid that we can use that makes sense, and it makes sense going into the future as well.
I agree. I think, so we've gone to now a pretty much fully hybrid model. So for town council meetings, school committee meetings, planning board meetings, we are, like 100% hybrid, I would say.
Right.
Those boards meet in person, but every meeting has the, capability to bring people in on Zoom, whether it's a petitioner from
Right.
the eastern part of the state for something before the planning board, they can join remotely. Members can join remotely. So I think it's a good solution. There was at one point, I think the rep from New Bedford, and I can't think of his name off the top of my head. Cabral, but it was written into the legislation that the hybrid meetings were going to be mandatory. And I thought, well, now that becomes problematic because, man, we got like 16 boards over the course of a year that meet. There's no way we can do that for 16 boards.
Yeah, and some want to meet in person. If you can, I think having a hybrid, but giving a little flexibility with it. And as you mentioned, like we have hearings all the time at the State House. And when people want to testify, I always feel bad when people from Western Mass, or especially if they're way up in the Berkshires, have to travel that far, wait for a few hours to speak for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and then drive all the way back. Those would be the ideal situations to say, okay, well, we can do that remotely. We'll have the physical hearing at the State House, but if people want to testify for something from North Adams or from Martha's Vineyard or wherever, they should have that opportunity without spending 10 hours traveling and maybe money they don't have, which would be good. And I think you get more involvement, you get more people that say, okay, I want to be part of that process.
Yeah. And there was the argument, I think, was made, or there seemed to be evidence that there was more engagement. And certainly in the early part of the pandemic, we had far more engagement when we went to like a fully Zoom meetings. A lot of people logged in to watch those meetings.
Yeah.
And so to that degree, I think it has helped. And yeah, technology took us that far. And when you think about the economy and on the business side, how many people, so I have 4 kids. 3 of them are in, software development. I don't foresee that they will ever work in an office again.
Yeah,
They all work from home.
I think I've heard that from a lot of the younger generation too, that their jobs are at home or maybe they have to go in once a week. And it really has just changed the world, how we do business. And I don't know what that's going to look like in 10 years from now. I don't know what it's going to do to people's, just their socialization skills by seeing people every day. I mean, I think some of it will be more productive, but that's why I like a kind of a combination, because you really need the in-person. You have to have that personal interaction with people at least part of the time. Otherwise, I think you start losing part of who we are as humans, that, you need to be around people.
Right. So I think we're good as far as, we'll see what happens. And once that sort of expires, I don't see remote participation ever going away.
Yeah.
It's been extended. At some point,
No,
I think that's going to become permanent.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, because if you can get more people involved, more people paying attention to what's going on, that's better for everybody.
So the state budget, boy, we're in good shape, I
Yeah.
would say, right?
I know we talked before off air that now when we were just going into the pandemic, we were all panicking. I know, like statewide, we were thinking, boy, this is horrible. We're gonna, whenever we come out of this, our budget's going to be in jeopardy for years to come. We figured everything we had would be depleted, but boy, were we wrong. We came out of it, obviously with federal funding, in much better shape, being able to take care of things that probably were 10, 20 years down the road, or we didn't even have a succinct plan to make sure we could do things. Then we got this excess of funding, and we were able to take care of a lot of things and still have our budget intact, so we're in great shape for the coming years, which, again, one of the silver linings for the state, that we're able to do that, and we're able to take care of things that maybe we couldn't have or wouldn't have been able to do in the near future.
Yeah, and I think it's worth making the point that the federal funding was a huge boon, but either at the state level or here in East Long Meadow, because we certainly experienced the same thing with the ARPA funds and used those.
Yeah.
With some controversy, I guess you could say, in the budget process this year. Overall, revenues are good. It's not like we're dependent on the federal money that once that goes away, we're going to be, what are we going to do?
You're right.
What, $8 billion in the reserve fund, rainy day fund?
And that was the other thing, right? Like you said, we got that influx of money from the federal government. Felt good, but then we weren't sure if our revenue is going to be down.
Correct.
So we're kind of playing makeup here. But as you mentioned, the revenues have been very good. So we're in a great position fiscally now and moving forward, which is great just for everybody around here, whether the Commonwealth in a whole or any of the 351 cities and towns.
Right, yeah. I saw projections are still, hovering around 5. They were up as high as like 8%.
Yeah.
Growth in the coming, 4 quarters, but even 5% growth.
Yeah.
In a so-called recession economy.
Right.
I think we're doing okay.
We're doing well. And hopefully we get more of that growth out here in Western Mass, which would be
That would be nice. That would
Yeah.
be nice. Although, I think overall, I think communities are doing well. And so I guess the question is, are there things that the state, from the Western Mass municipality standpoint, that the state could allocate some of those resources to, that have historically not come our way? Transportation is one, and
Yep.
of course your friend and colleague Senator Lesser has been, I think, pretty successful
Yeah.
advancing certainly the East-West Rail thing.
West-East, as you
West-East?
call it, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I like it. West-East. So that's a big nut, and that will certainly benefit, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, if that goes through, there's so many moving parts to it, but we've never been as close. And I think having Chairman Neal on board, and the Chairman of Ways and Means, you don't get that, if you get it once in your lifetime in your
right.
district, you're in pretty good shape. So I think we have everything aligned as best as possible, and hopefully we keep moving forward with that. I mean, it's still, even if everything goes right, it's still a long-term project, but that could be a game changer for Western Mass because we are in such an ideal place, from Boston, from New York City, from Vermont, New Hampshire, from Connecticut. We're in a perfect setting to get anywhere. And I mean, even now driving, it can be a pain depending on traffic. But if you had if you had a train going back and forth that without too many stops, you can get there in a reasonable amount of time. That can make a world of difference for somebody, whether it's a job, a young person getting out of college, they maybe want to live out here because the homes are a little bit more affordable, but they can work in the Boston area and have a salary probably a little higher than they would if they lived out here. That could definitely, it could be great for out here for, people staying here, people investing in the communities and the greater Springfield, the Pioneer Valley. So hopefully that stays on track and we can get something going with that. And the state has been, from the governor, the speaker, the Senate president, they've been very supportive of the process. And I think they understand that, we've taken some tough votes bailing out the MBTA.
Yes.
And, the first time we did it, I'm like, all right, it's Boston. You got to support the capital, boom. But then when you keep going back, it's difficult when you say, well, we've still got buses out here. And obviously we're not going to change that now. We don't have the infrastructure for it. But we need help out here with our transportation needs, as well.
Right. And I guess that's what I was thinking about again, allocating for transportation and, statewide. And again, we were talking beforehand, the governor's going to spend $13 million over the next 5 years on transportation infrastructure in the state. But the communities are, you talk to Bruce Fenney at the DPW and what we have locally for road projects, and we've got like just shy of 100 miles of roads.
Yep.
The Chapter 90 formula, I think we're like at 576,000 a year.
Yeah.
We cannot begin to tackle just keeping the roads
Right.
in shape with that kind of money. So yeah, we can do the MBTA, we can build West-East Rail.
But if you don't have your day-to-day things that people need to go into their jobs around here, going
Correct.
shopping, going to school, you're right. And that is one of the tougher things in the Northeast, that we have to spend a lot more money on our roadways than maybe you do in a warmer climate, just because it's cold and hot and they crack and
Right, yeah, they don't last long.
and so it seems like as soon as something's done, you almost have to start over again at the beginning of it and keep going through. And
Right.
yeah, that is a major problem. And we're hoping we can get, and that's part of what we're hoping we can get a bigger investment to make sure we can take care of those things. And not only just our roadways, but some of our bridges are in
yeah, the
horrible,
bridges are in tough
horrible shape. And the last thing you want is some catastrophe, whether it's
Correct.
here, eastern part, any part of the state. You want to make sure those are done right. There's no parts falling, there's no pieces rusting out, falling apart. So we've definitely got some needs there, and,
Yep.
and we'd like to address them and hopefully get a reasonable amount of revenue to be able to take care of these things.
So that formula, so the Chapter 90 formula
Yeah.
is pretty basic. It's miles of roads, essentially times population times
Yeah.
income. Has that ever been like reconsidered, or is that just kind of one of those things?
I can't remember the last time they've taken a look at it or decided, gee, does this make sense for every community, or does it benefit certain communities? And I don't know if that's necessarily an Eastern, Western Mass thing, but I think it probably has a lot more to do with, cities and towns that.
Right.
And I think sometimes, people look at certain towns and they think, oh, well, that town's got money. But it doesn't necessarily have money. Maybe some of the people in the towns have money, but a lot of these towns are, pretty much the same as far as their revenues and what they have.
Well, we have a new high school project in the works here.
Yes.
As we're very active early on, just trying to get the attention at the state level.
Yeah, it's a long and arduous process, as you know, just to get your foot in the door to be considered. never mind getting, the next steps to actually
Yeah.
get approved and start moving forward.
So we've been in the feasibility study now for a while, and we're at the point of being close to, I think, advancing, the preferred options.
Right.
They look interesting. There's discussion about a ad reno, which would essentially keep the existing footprint and some of the
Yeah.
building and then add on, and then there's, a new building. We've got a number of projects now and an opportunity in some ways to really think 20 years down the road.
Right.
What's this community going to be? But it goes back to that engagement. How do you engage young families moving in? Their kids are in school,
Right.
their kids are in soccer, their kids are doing this, they're working 2 jobs. How do you engage them in the process of visioning for 20 years? What do you want
Yeah.
this community to
And
be?
that is difficult, especially when, like you spoke, with different projects that certain areas of the population might be more supportive and other ones might not be. And especially when you've got, the police station, a school, DPW, town hall. Town halls and DPWs, the average person, they utilize them, but they don't think, oh, well, what's the benefit for me to support that sometimes?
Right.
So it is tough to engage people, especially when you've got multiple projects you're looking at in the coming years and saying, okay, obviously these cost money, but this is not just for today. This is for 10 years, 20, 30 years. This is for us, but it's also for the kids, the next generation. And it is difficult. And then, too, going to town meetings, you get such a small piece of the population that show up. And depending what the issue is, usually it's a stacked house. If it's a school issue, you're going to get the young parents coming in because they're concerned with schools. If it's senior center, you're going to get the seniors coming in. So it's tough to get, like you said, people engaged and really involved so they understand, what's going on, and they understand what the benefits or disadvantages of some of these projects may be for them.
So I sort of started that as a completely different question, but what I was getting at was ultimately there's going to be tax impact on all of these.
Absolutely.
Whatever the decisions are,
Yeah.
really and as far as high school goes, there is no option that does not cost
Right.
a huge amount of money.
Right.
Even bringing it up to code,
You're right.
they're looking at $100 million,
Yeah.
which the town is going to basically foot that entire bill anyway.
Yep.
So, and we talked beforehand, I'll, let everybody know, but the question of what is the state looking at in terms of statewide policies to help cities and towns address the tax problem and tax relief for senior populations. We have almost 30% of East Long Meadow's population is over 60. There's a lot of people in smaller, older homes.
Right.
What's their tax impact going to be on decisions that, frankly, I mean, in my general philosophical outlook would be, yes, you have to think about investing in that 20, 30-year time window. And that is going to be difficult for people
Right.
who aren't looking at a 20, 30-year time window,
Right.
frankly.
And you don't want to tax people or make it unaffordable so they can stay in a community they grew up in or have lived in
Correct.
for 20, 30 years. You'd like people, if they, whatever community it is, if they want to stay there, retire, and live out their life, I mean, hopefully everybody should have that opportunity.
So are there ways that the state could look at to up their participation with local communities in tax relief for seniors? And one of the things that I asked you about, and
Yeah.
I know in Maine, is using the homestead exemption
Right.
as a basis for tax relief for seniors.
And I like that idea. And I don't know, as we mentioned too before I started that, part of the problem with hybrid or being away is that you're not as in tune with everything that's going on because you don't have those conversations one-on-one with people. But I think that's a great idea, and if it hasn't been brought up, I certainly will, and I think it's certainly something to look at. Is it going to solve every problem? No, but if you can alleviate and give people a break that definitely need it, especially when you have so many potential projects coming up, again, you don't want to tax people out of their homes. I mean, that's the last thing any of us want to do.
Right. All right. So last thing, Veterans Day is coming up,
Yes.
November 11th. Would love to see a big turnout at the center of town for the.
I got to tell you, I'm always impressed. Any of the veterans ceremonies in East Long Meadow, usually you get a good crowd, whether it's 4th of July, Memorial Day, Veterans Day. I always really appreciate and like going to those, even though it's probably the shortest parade in history. But it's something special about it, and seeing the veterans, the pride on their faces, and seeing the people that a lot of them, I recognize from being there every year. But it's always nice when you get new people showing up as well.
Well, and the fact that you can say that because you're always here to see it, Brian. So
Yeah, I appreciate
for that.
the work that everybody does here, especially to recognize the veterans.
And this year, I want to point out to folks that there will be a special dedication ceremony at that regular ceremony at 11 o'clock on the 11th of November to recognize Major Frederick Doughton, who was served and lost his life during the Vietnam War from East Long Meadow and has not up until now been included or recognized as a Vietnam vet. And the plaque on the monument stone by the town hall has been corrected, and his name will appear, and that is going to be dedicated that day. Family members of his will be in town for that ceremony, so that's a kind of an extra special
Yeah,
thing.
I mean, as mentioned, it's a special event to begin with, just to recognize the veterans, but to have something like that and to get him recognized finally, I think that's so special, and to have his family here. So hopefully more people come out for that. Hopefully the weather cooperates as well. That's you never know with that.
You never know. But a lot of credit to my friend Bruce Moore from the East Long Meadow Historical Commission, who is also very dedicated and diligently did the work to do that research and find out, and personally took the plaque and had that done. So,
Yeah, those are the little things that go such
Correct.
a long way. And I mean, veterans have made so many sacrifices themselves. So I always think, even if it's pouring rain, snow, that's a very small sacrifice to make for half hour, an hour, to be there to celebrate and to honor our veterans.
yes, sir. Well, it will be a pleasure as always to see you there, and we'll be there, of course. And
Look forward to it.
thanks for coming in. I mean, I'm glad we finally got
Yeah,
to do
I know,
this.
I know. It took a while to get together, but I appreciate you doing this as well, and giving people an opportunity just to hear various things throughout the community to keep them updated and involved. So I appreciate everything you do.
All right. Representative Brian Ashe from Second Hamden District, thank you so much.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate it.
Thanks to all of you. That'll do it for this episode of the Don Maki Podcast, and we'll see you next time.